As Kelly pointed out, and as many of you know, the Navajo Generating Station is situated near Page, but on the Navajo Nation. And SRP has completed its lease renewal for the lands of the Navajo Nation. As she pointed out, virtually 90%, 85% of the employment at Navajo Generating Station are members of the Navajo Nation. They obviously have many, many interests in the future of this large plant. And we have with us this evening the Executive Director of the Navajo Nation EPA, Stephen Etsitty. What better person to have representing the Navajo Nation than the head of their Environmental Protection Agency? And Stephen previously worked for the United States Environmental Protection Agency in San Francisco, in the regional office in Washington, D.C., and has served at least 2 presidents of the Navajo Nation as the Executive Director of the Navajo Nation EPA. And Stephen was an intimate participation in the development of the agreement that Kelly introduced this evening. So with that, Stephen Etsitty.
Thank you, Bill. And I'd just like to say good evening, Yat-A. Fine folks from Flagstaff and around the Grand Canyon, Colorado Plateau. I'm Toahe, which is an easy, quick translation is water flows together people. And my father's clan is a Sheena, or a salt clan. And for those people from the Navajo Nation, you'll know if you're related to me. And for those that aren't Navajo, at least you'll understand a little bit more about who I am from my clan affiliation. I am part of that long growing tradition stemming from the words of our former leaders from the 19th century who envisioned the continued livelihood of Diné on this earth, told to young people and people at that time when we were held in bondage, we were trying to figure out how to have a relationship with this new entity called the United States government. He said, go out and get an education. Go out and make something of yourself so you can come back and help your people. And it's almost cliche today, but it's still meaningful to many of us. So, as Bill mentioned, my professional experience extends to being a federal bureaucrat within the U.S. EPA, and now I can claim 10 years as a tribal bureaucrat within the Navajo Nation government. And for a lot of people, government is not a good thing. But I'm a lifelong public servant, coming out of the tradition of wanting to do something helpful, not only for my people, but for our neighbors all around us, our Hopi neighbors, our Southern San Juan Paiute neighbors, our Wallapai neighbors, our friends down in Supai, our friends and neighbors, the Ute Mountains in the southern Ute, southern Colorado. We have a long relationship with all of our kin in this region that's now known as the Four Corners region. You know, as you all know, spend time in this museum and other museums along the Southwest, these political boundaries are. Questions raised about whether or not someone like me, whether it's me myself personally, or any other Navajo EPA director has authority to represent the Navajo Nation. And I just threw these slides in there recently. But the Navajo EPA is a duly established component of the Navajo Nation government. And here's the actual encoded law for our plan of operation, saying that we do represent the nation with respect to the environmental issues and what the executive director has in terms of specific authority. And then under our own version of the Clean Air Act, the Navajo Nation Clean Air Act, which was amended as recently as 2004, the council places the primary responsibility within my program, the air quality program, and again, state some specific things that the director of the Navajo EPA is authorized to do. And when it comes to dealing with something like the BART issue, that's what this really is all about, is that we have the responsibility to respond to the opportunity for comments. We have the responsibility to engage in government-to-government consultations now with the federal government vis-a-vis EPA on these on each rule that we feel we want to have our voice heard. So a lot of my time recently has been dealing with BART issues, with the utility back issue or the mercury rule issue that was on the table in front of us a couple of years ago. And we will be rolling up our sleeves and getting into the greenhouse gas and carbon dioxide proposals that are being developed by US EPA. So if anybody wonders where exactly we get the authority to do what we do, you can go to our website and check out our version of the Clean Air Act. And recently, more to the point of our gathering here tonight, looking towards the future, the Navajo Nation government recently enacted a revised energy policy. These are just a couple of the things that I summarized out of that document.
I think the SRP really needs to look at that closely. There's nowhere in there that says that Navajo Nation can represent the whole tribe and is authorized to speak for the whole.
Well, I do know that in that matter, it's not necessarily speaking for it, but we have many of the same interests at the governmental level. We never said, and that was a misstatement. It's not the case, but we have similar interests as at the governmental level. And I do know that my president authorized me to participate in these issues. I've got specific statutory authority and I'm responsible for carrying them out. And I do know that I think still today, a resolution by the Hopi Tribal Council states that the Hopi tribe is in a neutral position on NGS. So that was one of the things that was considered. But I'm talking primarily at a governmental level. And I know that there's differences from the community level, just as there are differences of opinion at the Navajo side between the community level and the governmental level. So,
Stephen, I'd like to make a statement. Number one, I'm glad that this forum is taking place because throughout this discussion, I think the general public is going to get an idea of some of the questions and the concerns that are unresolved and unaddressed on behalf of the whole tribe. Because we're such a small political entity, we have no leverage. Whereas our neighbors, the Navajo, have quite a bit of that. And a lot of times, like you say, we're all community residents of the Colorado Plateau. We're all affected by what happens. And there are many issues that cause frustration for the Hopi people simply because, as has been brought out by SRP, we are a stakeholder in all of the interests that are being represented, but here there's no representation here. And then the other thing is, I speak from experience because I served 30 years as a regional realty officer for the Bureau of Indian Affairs Navajo region. And I dealt with all of these, Steve, that you know, that you're dealing with, and I would say that in a lot of ways you haven't mentioned on all of the things that you've done, or your agency on Navajo has done with regards to that. And if in fact you have that authority by your tribal governments, I think it's important and imperative that you also look at the Hopi people as part of that, because you have the experience. You've been in Washington just like I have. And the reason I say that is because before I left, I helped develop the Desert Rock Project with Jim Finney, and I was a Bureau representative that did that. Plus, I was on the task group. I was designated as one of 8 of the realty officers in the United States to revise 25 CFR.
Yeah, I would just like to close by saying that this is a real interesting point, moving forward into the future.
Yeah.
My programs, especially the ones that have delegated authority or primacy, EPA is very concerned about our ability to provide fair and meaningful input into our decisions. So we're bound by regulations, Administrative Procedure Act type regulations, for notifying the public, for doing our own public comment period, for listening to concerns of folks out there when we make an action on a permit, if they want a public hearing. There are prescriptions as to how to follow the process to request that, and we're obliged to go through the process. So far, as I mentioned, I've got 14 facilities. We've permitted all of them. They're 5-year Title V Clean Air Act permits. In our regulation, there's a small section that says that the public also has a responsibility to comment. We haven't received a lot of comment from our public. We include the Hopi Reservation. We put our announcements on Navajo radio. We put it in area-wide publications. I think every now and then we do go to KUII and share our announcements there too, because we know that there are interests. We have received some comments from Hopi members on the actions that we take in the Navajo EPA. So, you know, we're bound to do that. It's not just a Navajo program for Navajo citizens. There is an avenue available. So I would just close by saying, as we move into the future, understanding these programmatic activities that the government, both Navajo Nation and Hopi, and other Indian tribes, along with the state of Arizona and the federal government, it's going to remain complex, as Bill mentioned. And the only thing we can do is just to dive in there and ask for more help from my programs. We have a responsibility to serve the public with information. We have a website. We know that everybody likes websites. We do a lot of outreach. We spend a lot of our money and our time going to schools, getting the young population, going to chapter meetings and other gatherings in the region. We participated in the RAP. We participated in the Grand Canyon Visibility Transport Commission.
Including your own forms. You know, this presentation is so skewed. The data that you have co-opted data that promote a perspective, that promotes your agenda. Now, what I also like to, because this is an energy forum, and to ask you, now while you're here, what your position is on fracking, what your position is on uranium, because you, as a public official and authority, have been not transparent and, well, as you say, you're out in the schools and you're out in the chapters and you're doing all this, but in the back room, what are you doing with these folks and not even consulting with your Hopi brothers and sisters, or even your Diné brothers and sisters?
We have annual conferences for our programs to specifically talk about the issues that people want us to talk about. We have programmatic meetings. We have a drinking water conference. EPA. EPA. The EPA through their annual granting program. So as far as the issues for the future, again, this document, the energy policy, which one of the interesting aspects here is that while fossil fuels will remain abundant for development, it does set us towards the path for more serious development of renewable energy resources on the Navajo Nation.
And renewable energy wasn't even on the top of the priorities for the energy policy. It was at the very bottom.
The energy policy is not organized in a prioritized manner. It's a list, and everything in there is a priority. As oftentimes you hear many people talk about, everything is a priority. So if it's in the policy, it is a priority. Thank you very much.
I did forewarn you, it's a complex issue.
Excuse me, I had my hand raised and I was being very polite. And one thing about the energy policy, and you talk about transparency, Mr. Etsitty, that didn't go out to the people. And you didn't let the people know you were part of SRP's hand-picked technical working group either until afterwards, and that you were negotiating with a Navajo Generating Station, the lease renewal, until afterwards. Nobody knew you were doing all of that from 2010.
These assignments were made by presidential memo and executive order, and when these teams were formed, they were announced publicly.
No, they weren't. You're a political appointee of President Shelley, and he's Mr. Cole.
Okay, hang on. We can talk about tribal politics for the rest of the evening, but we're not going to do that until after we've heard from each of the panelists. I see one more hand.
Will we get a chance to ask further questions?
Absolutely. We will have plenty of time to ask questions and make comments as we've already begun doing. But let's hear from two more speakers.